The surface may be still, but the spirit is stirring deep beneath. Imagine a quiet lake at dawn. The water is perfectly still, untouched by wind, reflecting only the pale hint of morning light. Nothing moves, and yet below that stillness, life teems. Currents shift, roots stretch deeper, and the world prepares to awaken. That's how grace works in silence. That's how God moves when we think nothing is moving at all. There are seasons when prayer feels like it disappears into the sky, when we knock and no door opens, when our soul aches for an answer but hears nothing in return. The silence grows loud, pressing in on the heart, and somewhere between petitions and patience, we begin to wonder, has heaven gone quiet, or have we been forgotten? But silence is not abandonment. Silence is not neglect. Silence in God's hands is sacred. It is not a void, but a veil, behind which God weaves healing, strength, and purpose in secret. We are not being ignored. We are being prepared. As the prophet Isaiah reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." Isaiah 55:8-9. This silence you feel, it is not a stop sign. It is a sacred pause. And in that pause, something holy is happening. You are not forgotten. You are being fortified. It begins subtly. A delay in the response you hoped would come quickly. A prayer whispered over and over, met with nothing but more time. You start to scan your life for signs, any sign, that God is listening, that He's near, that He still sees you. But the silence stretches, and the waiting grows heavier. And somewhere in that quiet, a question begins to form, not always spoken aloud, but felt deep within. Has God forgotten me? This is not a question of doubt in God's power. It is a cry from a heart trying to hold on to God's presence, and that's what makes it so painful. Because when you're walking faithfully, doing all you know to do, and yet nothing changes, when prayers remain unanswered and doors remain shut, it's not just frustrating, it's disorienting. You begin to wonder if your faith is failing, if your hope is foolish, if perhaps you are the exception to the promise that God never leaves nor forsakes. But what if what feels like forgetting is actually a form of fortifying? Lisa TerKeurst once said, "When you feel like God is doing nothing, it might be because He's doing something in you." That changes the lens. That changes everything. Because suddenly, the silence doesn't mean you're abandoned. It means you're under construction. When we imagine God working, we often picture outward miracles, sudden provision, healing breakthroughs, signs in the sky. But often, His most transformative work happens inwardly, invisibly, not in the headlines of our lives, but in the hidden places of our soul. In the moments when we're tempted to give up, but choose to pray anyway, when we feel weak, but show up one more day, when no one sees, but God sees and smiles. To be fortified means to be made stronger, not by accident, but by design. It's intentional, it's strategic, it's deeply loving. Think of the walls of a castle, thickened with stone, not for decoration, but for defense. God is doing that with you. He's reinforcing your foundation. He's strengthening what cannot be shaken. He's preparing you to carry what you've been praying for. Because the blessing you're waiting for will need a soul strong enough to hold it. We often pray for comfort, but God prepares us for calling. We ask for ease, but God equips us for endurance. We plead for a quick rescue, but God is raising up resilience. And the silence? That's not Him leaving you alone. That's Him working silently in the deep places where transformation happens slow but sure. Jeremiah 29:11 is not just a verse we quote when things go well. It is the anchor we cling to when nothing seems to be working. "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. Not, I hope to have a plan. Not, I might figure it out. God says, I know. And what He knows is always greater than what we feel. So if all you feel today is forgotten, overlooked, stuck, remember this: feelings may speak, but they do not define. Silence may surround you, but it is not the final word. God is still writing your story, even if this chapter feels blank. Mark Batterson once wrote, "The silence of God is not His absence, it's His artistry. It is the sacred space between who you were and who He is making you to become. And in that space, something holy is happening, even now, even here. But you have to be willing to trust Him beyond what you see. You have to anchor your hope in what you know to be true, even when life doesn't reflect it yet. You are not forgotten. You are being fortified, and the fortifying will carry you further than you can imagine." This world celebrates speed. We praise the overnight success, the instant reply, the immediate reward. But the kingdom of God works differently. It works in seeds, in slow growth, in silence, and in strength that no one else can see. Not yet, but it's there. And one day, when the time is right, it will be revealed. Until then, you must hold on to truth like a lifeline. Truth like this: you are not forgotten because God does not forget what He created with love. You are not behind because God does not operate by the world's timeline. You are not invisible because God's gaze never leaves the one He calls beloved. If you are praying and nothing is changing, keep praying. If you are hoping and everything is still the same, keep hoping. If you are walking forward and all you hear is silence, keep walking. Because silence is not the end. It's the soil where faith grows roots. There is a reason God uses the metaphor of a shepherd so often in Scripture. A shepherd doesn't shout every moment. He doesn't always speak. But he never stops watching, never stops caring, never stops leading, even in silence. Sometimes the sheep don't need more noise. They just need to trust that the shepherd is still near. So the question is not, is God speaking? The question is, will I keep trusting when He's silent? This is the deeper work of faith, not just believing when we feel something, but believing when we feel nothing at all. That is the kind of faith that moves mountains, not because the mountain moved, but because we did not. And that kind of faith is built slowly, tenderly, in silence. So what can you do right now while you wait? You can shift the lens. You can choose to see this moment not as a punishment, but as preparation. Not as a rejection, but as refinement. You can choose to believe that something eternal is being formed in you, not in the noise, but in the stillness. Here's one small way to practice that today. Each morning, write down one thing, just one, that you're grateful for, even in this hard season. It doesn't have to be big. It could be the sunlight through your window, a friend's text, the breath in your lungs. This small act will rewire your mind to remember that even in waiting, you are still under God's care. Gratitude in the silence is not denial. It is defiance. It is faith that refuses to die. It is hope that lifts its head in the dark and says, God is still good, and He is. He always has been. He always will be. So no, you are not forgotten. You are being fortified, quietly, carefully, powerfully. And when this chapter ends and the next begins, you will look back on this season, not with bitterness, but with awe. Because the you that walks out of this silence will be stronger than the one who walked in.
Hidden work is still holy work. Beneath every flourishing tree lies a world unseen. The roots stretch quietly, relentlessly, burrowing deeper into the earth, anchoring, feeding, sustaining. They remain out of sight, untouched by praise or recognition. Yet without them, no branch would grow, no blossom would bloom. The beauty that catches the eye is always rooted in what the eye cannot see. So it is with the work of God. His greatest movements often begin underground, hidden, unnoticed, unapplauded. He does not always start with spectacle. He begins with the soil of the soul. He tills, he plants, he tends to what lies beneath the surface of our lives, our memories, wounds, motives, fears. What others ignore, he cultivates. What we hide, he heals. In seasons of silence, we tend to measure growth by what's visible. We watch for answered prayers, open doors, clear direction. But faith isn't grown in spotlights. It is deepened in shadows. It matures in the quiet moments where no audience watches, where applause doesn't echo. In the dark, God is still gardening. Holly Girth once wrote, "Some blessings are not delayed, they're just being deeply planted." That redefines the waiting. The silence we experience isn't the absence of movement, it's the presence of depth. What's taking root in you now may not be ready for daylight, not because it's wrong, but because it's sacred. Some works of grace require darkness, not to hide, but to prepare. Think of the way seeds grow. No one sees the first push through the soil. No one celebrates the moment roots find water. But those are the miracles that make the future possible. And so it is with God's work in your soul. You may not feel it, you may not see it, but something holy is happening within. God is repairing what you thought was ruined. He's softening the hardness that years of pain hardened. He's restoring what trauma distorted. He's pruning what pride inflated. This isn't punishment, it's mercy. It's a rebuilding, brick by quiet brick, breath by silent breath. This is the work that changes everything. Not with noise, but with nuance. Not with public signs, but with personal sanctification. Sometimes we miss what God is doing simply because it's not loud. We're trained to associate movement with volume, answers with visibility. But that's not how God works. He doesn't need to announce what he's planting. He knows the power of silence. He knows the strength that comes when things are allowed to form slowly. A.W. Tozer said, "God is always at work, even when he's silent." That truth holds even when prayers seem unanswered, even when doors remain closed. The lack of noise does not mean a lack of nearness. The lack of events does not mean a lack of engagement. Heaven does not forget how to move when earth becomes still. Jesus once described the kingdom of God as yeast a woman took and mixed into 3 measures of flour until it worked all through the dough. Luke 13:21. It's a quiet image, no lightning, no spectacle, just small, patient, invisible influence that changes everything over time. That's how grace works. That's how healing works. That's how transformation unfolds. The yeast does not shout. It does not demand. It permeates. So if you feel like nothing is changing, that could be the best sign of all. It could mean the deepest work is happening, the kind of work that outlasts emotion, that cannot be uprooted by trial. It means your faith is no longer just reactive. It's being rewoven into your identity. It's becoming who you are, not just what you feel. What's forming in silence often has the most staying power. It's not easily shaken by external winds because it was forged internally, by fire and by grace. That kind of faith is what God values most. Not the noisy declarations that waver with emotion, but the quiet resilience that stands through storms. And that kind of faith only grows in hidden places. So what if this season isn't about what God is giving you, but about who he's making you into? What if the silence isn't the absence of an answer, but the shaping of a vessel? What if the root system God is forming in your soul is going to nourish something you haven't even imagined yet? When we stop seeing silence as delay and start seeing it as design, peace returns. We stop striving to earn what is already ours, God's presence. We stop panicking when results don't show up quickly. We remember that real faith is not microwaved, it's marinated, and that changes how we live today. It reorients the purpose of this quiet hour. We no longer wake up looking for evidence. We rise to embrace process. We begin to see the holy in the hidden, because hidden work is holy work. It's holy to forgive quietly, even when no one applauds. It's holy to return to prayer again and again, even when no visible breakthrough comes. It's holy to keep walking with God when the road is lonely, and to keep trusting when the path disappears. These are not wasted acts. They are sacred seeds, and they will bloom in time. God does not rush the roots. He knows that the higher the tree must grow, the deeper the foundation must reach. The work he does now, though quiet, is essential. The delays you feel are not meant to harm, but to hold. He is preserving you by preparing you. And when the time is right, the growth will be undeniable, not just to others, but to you. You'll realize you no longer panic like before, no longer run at the first sign of discomfort, no longer collapse under pressure. Why? Because roots were formed in secret, in silence, in sacred stillness. And until then, you have a choice. You can resent the silence, or you can revere it. You can resist the hidden season, or you can rest in it. You can chase signs, or you can sit with the Spirit. Here's one small, simple way to lean into this process. Each morning, instead of scrolling through the noise of the world, begin by opening Scripture, even just a few verses. Let His Word greet you before the world does. This isn't about adding one more religious task to your list. It's about turning your attention to the only voice that speaks even in silence. The point is not how much you read. The point is where you root your focus. That one act of quiet surrender can redirect your heart. It's a small, holy decision, one that shapes the entire day, one that trains your soul to listen again, even when heaven whispers. You are not being overlooked, you are being overseen. You are not on pause. You are on purpose. You are not missing out. You are being made whole. And this season, though quiet, is not empty. It is full of divine motion. God's hands are never idle when it comes to His children. If you could see what He's forming in you, you would not rush a single moment. You would treasure the silence, not fight it. You would honor the hidden places, not despise them. So today, resist the urge to demand signs. Resist the fear that says God must not care. Resist the temptation to trade intimacy for immediacy. And instead, plant yourself deeper. Root yourself in what you know, that God is faithful, that He is present, that nothing you do in secret with Him will ever be wasted. You are not alone. You are not abandoned. You are not stuck. You are sacred ground in the making, and He is tilling that ground with tenderness. Let the silence refine you. Let the hidden work shape you. Let the roots grow deep, because the fruit will come. And when it does, it will carry the flavor of grace, the weight of endurance, and the fragrance of trust. Hidden work is still holy work, and the one who began it in you will be faithful to complete it. In the stillness, He strengthens you. Stillness is uncomfortable for the modern heart. We are conditioned to move, to act, to solve, to fix. When we find ourselves in a place where nothing changes, where silence lingers, our instincts tell us to panic. We feel we must be doing something wrong. If we just prayed harder, fasted longer, believed more, maybe God would respond. But what if the silence isn't punishment at all? What if stillness is part of the strengthening? To be still in a noisy world is a spiritual discipline. It requires trust, not the shallow kind that depends on answered prayers or visible blessings, but the kind that holds fast even when heaven seems quiet. That kind of trust is forged in sacred stillness. It is not a retreat from life, it is a preparation for it. Anne Voskamp wrote, "God often removes the comforts to show us the Comforter." That speaks directly to the seasons when everything that once reassured us disappears. The predictable routines, the familiar signs, the easy faith, they fade. What's left is a deeper encounter, not with outcomes, but with God Himself. When comforts are stripped away, the soul must choose where it stands. Will it collapse into despair, or will it dig roots into the unseen? Will it flail for control, or will it surrender to a deeper kind of strength, one that doesn't come from answers, but from presence? Psalm 46:10 invites us with simplicity and depth. Be still and know that I am God. It does not say, be still and feel that I am God, or be still and understand that I am God. It says, know. That kind of knowing goes beyond emotion. It settles into the bones. It becomes the quiet certainty that even here, especially here, God is at work. Stillness is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not apathy. Stillness is a position of strength born from surrender. It is the stance of one who has chosen not to run ahead or fall behind, but to remain exactly where grace has planted them. In Exodus 14:14, as the Israelites faced the impossible, trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, Moses delivered a word of holy paradox. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Stillness was not the absence of action. It was the presence of faith. The strength required in that moment wasn't physical. It was spiritual. To trust that God was moving when all they saw was danger. To hold position when everything in them wanted to flee. You may be facing your own Red Sea today. Circumstances that threaten to overwhelm. Fears that shout louder than faith. Questions that remain unanswered. And perhaps you've done all you can. Prayed, wept, sought wisdom. And yet the situation remains. The waters haven't parted. In moments like this, stillness is not doing nothing. It is doing the most difficult thing, choosing not to control, choosing not to manipulate, choosing not to abandon hope. Stillness says, I don't understand this, but I trust the one who does. That trust doesn't grow in ease. It grows in tension, in waiting, in the ache of unanswered prayers, and the quiet of unchanging circumstances. That's where your roots of faith grow deeper. When God invites you into stillness, He's not withdrawing. He's drawing closer. But His presence may not feel the way it used to. It may not stir emotions or provide instant clarity. That's because He's shifting your foundation from feelings to faith. Faith that is built only on feelings will collapse under pressure. But faith built in stillness stands even when storms come. It knows that silence does not mean absence, that waiting is not wasting, that stillness is not stagnation. God is not interested in shallow trust. He desires something deeper, something that holds even when you don't feel held. And so He leads you into seasons of stillness, not to abandon you, but to anchor you. This anchoring cannot be rushed. It is slow, intentional, gentle, but it is sure. It happens in the hidden place where the soul learns to rest without explanations, where peace begins to bloom without evidence, where hope takes root without conditions. To be strengthened in stillness is to be prepared for more than you can see. God is not just getting you through this moment. He is forming someone who will stand in the next, not shaken by silence, not moved by chaos, not defined by what they see, but by who they know. This is why stillness matters, not because it is comfortable, but because it is transformative. To receive strength in stillness is to become unshakable. Not because life stops hurting, but because you know you are held through it. Not because circumstances align, but because Christ becomes your center. And here's the miracle. You can begin to find rest right in the middle of the waiting. Peace does not have to wait for the answer. Joy does not have to wait for the breakthrough. Stillness becomes a sanctuary, not a prison, but a place of presence. A space where God speaks without words, heals without noise, transforms without drama. In that space, fear begins to lose its grip. Despair loosens its hold. Anxiety fades into the background. Not because your situation has changed, but because you have. You are no longer searching for signs. You are sitting with the Savior, and in His presence you find what striving never gives: soul-deep strength. So if this season feels still, let it. Don't rush what God is doing. Don't resent what you don't understand. Lean in, listen. Let stillness become sacred to you. Let it soften your striving. Let it rewire your reflex to run. Let it teach you to stand. God is not punishing you with silence. He is positioning you for strength. He is building a foundation that cannot be shaken, a trust that will not fail. He is crafting a soul that does not need constant confirmation, because it rests in constant communion. And what can you do as this strength is formed? One small thing: dedicate a few minutes each morning to sit in silence with Him. No demands, no pressure, no need for words. Just show up and be present. Let your stillness become your offering. Let your surrender become your prayer. This isn't about performance. It's about posture. It's about turning your heart toward God and saying, I'm here, even in the quiet, even in the dark, even in the not yet. That simple act of presence begins to shift everything. Not outwardly, perhaps, but inwardly, eternally. You are not being ignored. You are being infused with strength, quietly, daily, faithfully. The silence may feel like a void, but it is a vessel. It holds the grace that is growing, the faith that is maturing, the resilience that is rising. Stillness is not where your story ends. It is where your soul is equipped. And when the time comes, when the door opens, when the prayer is answered, you won't emerge weaker for having waited. You will rise stronger for having stayed, because in the stillness, He strengthens you. And that strength will carry you forward, not just through this season, but through everyone that follows.
Delayed doesn't mean denied. Waiting often feels like a contradiction to fate. When prayers stretch into weeks, when years pass without answers, when hope feels like it's pressed against a closed door, it's easy to believe the delay is a sign that something's wrong. The longer the silence lingers, the more we wrestle with questions that whisper through the quiet. Was the prayer heard? Did I misunderstand God's promise? Am I waiting in vain? The soul becomes weary, not just from the absence of response, but from the inner tension of not knowing whether the waiting carries meaning or is simply divine rejection in disguise. But there's a deeper truth hidden in the mystery of delay, one that transforms the entire perspective on this stretch of time we often dread. Delay is not denial. The two are not equal. One is a pause with a purpose, the other is a conclusion. God's silence is never the closing of a door without the opening of something greater. The time between the asking and the receiving is not a dead zone. It's a refining space, a proving ground, a sacred threshold where faith is purified, intentions are clarified, and trust is solidified. Christine Caine put it this way: God's timing is always perfect, even when our patience isn't. That tension between perfection and patience is precisely where spiritual maturity is born. The delay isn't random, it's rarely convenient, but it is always intentional. When the answers don't arrive quickly, the soul has the opportunity to deepen deepen its reliance on the giver rather than just the gift. There's a verse in Proverbs that captures this ache and promise. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. Proverbs 13-12. The heartache and delay is real. It is not imagined. But that same delay, when entrusted to God, can give birth to something far more lasting than immediate gratification. It produces life, strong, rooted, and enduring. Faith is not measured by how loudly we declare it in public, but by how quietly we hold it when nothing seems to change. That holding space, the in-between, the prolonged wait, it invites a kind of trust that rests not in visible outcomes, but in the unchanging character of the one who made the promise. Philip Yancey once wrote, "Faith means believing in advance what will only make sense in reverse." This kind of trust doesn't come easily. It doesn't form in the shallow end of life's experiences. It develops when the clock ticks past the point where we thought answers should arrive and nothing happens. It grows when we choose to remain open even when the path forward feels closed. To live in the space of holy delay is to admit our limits while leaning into divine wisdom. It's where we surrender our timelines, our strategies, and our need for certainty. It's where we learn that God doesn't withhold out of cruelty, but often holds back out of mercy, out of love. Because what's ahead requires a version of us that is still in formation. The waiting becomes sacred when we begin to trust not just in God's outcomes, but in His timing. That trust changes how we interpret closed doors. It helps us see detours not as failures, but as rerouting. It shifts our questions from "why is this happening?" to "what is God shaping in me while I wait?" There's a precision in the pace of God that rarely aligns with the urgency of human desire. But that's exactly why His pace is trustworthy. He sees the whole landscape. He understands the timing of each heart, each connection, each open door. He is not just coordinating events. He's cultivating us for the weight of what's ahead. To be entrusted with something from God is not simply about readiness in skill or effort. It is about maturity in spirit, and that maturity is often grown in the hidden corridors of delay. When time seems stagnant, but faith continues to breathe, a quiet transformation takes place. And so, the delay becomes a classroom. Not one filled with obvious instruction, but one built through experience, where perseverance replaces anxiety, where prayer deepens without performance, and where trust begins to expand beyond what we can control. This is where formation overtakes frustration, where the soul is no longer seeking escape from the weight, but beginning to be shaped by it. God's hand doesn't always remove the delay, but He never wastes it. He uses it to work within us something that immediate answers never could. In the silence, we begin to hear. In the pause, we begin to grow. In the delay, we begin to see, not all at once, but gradually, that the waiting was never a sign of rejection. It was evidence of a deeper work being done beneath the surface. There is power in choosing to trust what is not yet visible, in choosing to worship while wondering, in deciding that God is good not because of the pace of His response, but because of the unchanging nature of His love. What does this look like in practice? It means rising in the morning not to see what God has done for you, but to thank Him for what He is doing in you. It means holding your requests with open hands and asking not just for fulfillment, but for transformation. It means learning to see the delay not as a barrier, but as a blessing in disguise. The seed that waits in the soil is not dead, it is developing. And the longer the seed remains hidden, the stronger its roots will grow. Some prayers are like that, hidden from view but alive with promise, not forgotten, not discarded. simply not yet ready. That waiting may not feel holy in the moment. It may feel like confusion, doubt, even grief. But holiness often takes the shape of slow growth. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It forms steadily, with purpose, in silence, and God remains near in all of it. Not watching from a distance, but walking closely beside, guiding, without always explaining. The longer the wait, the more intimate the journey becomes, if we choose to stay in step with Him. So much of faith is not about what we understand, but about who we trust. And in this season, even when the heavens seem quiet, that trust is not in vain. The delay is not the end of the story. It is the part of the story where character is forged, where faith is refined, where love is tested and proven true. If you're holding a prayer that feels unanswered, that's not failure, it's formation. If you're waiting for something long promised and the time stretches on, that's not neglect, it's preparation. If you've been hoping for a breakthrough and the silence continues, that's not dismissal, it's alignment. Trust does not always feel peaceful. Sometimes it feels like choosing again and again to believe that your heart is safe in God's hands, even when your mind can't comprehend the delay. And that choice, repeated in the quiet, held in the waiting, is where strength is born. In that stillness, a habit can help anchor your heart. Write down the prayer you are still waiting to see fulfilled. Circle it, not as a reminder of absence, but as a symbol of belief. Each day, place your hand over it and speak not to the outcome, but to the one who holds it. Simply say, I still trust you, Lord. That small act shifts your posture. It doesn't force the answer. It invites the strength to keep believing. The delay is not wasted time. It is consecrated space, and God knows exactly how to fill it. He is nearest when He seems the furthest. There are moments when the heart feels hollow and heaven sounds distant. Prayers return void. The sacred feels hidden. Light filters thinly through spiritual fog, and what once felt vibrant becomes muted. These are not signs of failure in faith, nor evidence of being forsaken. They are sacred thresholds, places where God draws closest, though not in ways we're used to recognizing. When God feels furthest, He is often refining perception. The senses no longer cling to emotion or physical reassurance, but begin to tune themselves toward the deeper frequency of spiritual communion. In that quiet, something essential is awakened: the capacity to believe without needing to feel, to trust without confirmation, to stay when everything inside wants to flee. Henri Nouwen once said, "We may feel abandoned, but faith tells us we are surrounded." That tension between emotion and reality is where a different kind of knowing emerges. Not through sight or sound, but through still conviction. In the very places where we assume distance, God is revealing nearness through deeper presence. There's nothing passive about that presence. It doesn't shout, it doesn't interrupt, it waits. It surrounds. It breathes life into tired spaces of the soul. Psalm 23:4 echoes this reality. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The verse doesn't promise an escape from the valley. It promises companionship through it. The perceived absence of God is never truly absence. It is a transition into intimacy that no longer relies on visible signs. It teaches the soul to find its rest not in outcomes but in essence, not in the momentary but in the eternal. It is a slow undoing of fear, a stripping away of dependency on what is seen, a recalibration of trust. In these moments, strength doesn't come from certainty. It comes from presence. The quiet assurance that nothing has changed in God's posture, even if everything feels altered in your own. God still watches, He still carries, He still whispers, but the volume of His love is no longer measured by how loudly it speaks, but by how deeply it sustains. God walks with the wounded, waits with the weary, and whispers to the forgotten. These words from Bob Goff invite a reorientation of the heart. They remind us that what seems like divine distance might actually be the form God's nearness takes when He wants to speak to us beneath the surface noise. When emotion fades, truth remains. When strength falters, grace upholds. This closeness is often missed, not because it is hidden, but because we expect it to arrive in familiar forms. Yet God is not limited to past manifestations. He moves in ways that invite growth, ways that stretch trust, reshape vision, and call the soul deeper into union. Discomfort does not mean abandonment. Silence does not
mean dismissal. The feeling of being overlooked does not alter the fact of being held. These truths anchor the spirit when everything else feels unstable. They become a quiet strength, not one that demands answers, but one that leans into trust. In this sacred stillness, even the simplest act becomes a doorway to divine connection. Looking in the mirror each morning and speaking aloud the reminder, God is with me, even now, reinforces reality over perception. It realigns the soul with what is unshaken, not because the storm is over, but because truth stands firm. God's nearness is not proven by ease. It is revealed in endurance, in the choice to remain faithful when the feelings disappear, in the decision to keep seeking when nothing is seen, in the posture of surrender that says, "Your presence is enough, even when I cannot trace it." He remains, through shadows, through silence, through seasons that test every part of you, not at a distance, but as a companion who never steps away, even when His footsteps cannot be heard. The valley is not proof of His absence. It is often the stage where His nearness becomes most transformative. The sacredness of this truth doesn't require explanation. It invites experience. And that experience may not always come with clarity or comfort, but it always carries grace. You have not been left behind. You have not been forgotten. What you interpret as silence may be the very space where heaven is holding you closer than you know. God works deeply in the quiet. He speaks in the stillness. He heals where no eye sees, and He strengthens where no one applauds. Your life is not on hold. It is in holy hands. The waiting, the delay, the quiet ache, they are not empty. They are the soil of your becoming. So stay steady, stay rooted. Let grace do its work. The one who holds galaxies has not let go of you, not for a second. He is working in the silence, even now, even here, even in this moment.